Good evening and welcome to our Refugee Week seminar. How can Christians welcome refugees? Stories from Bristol and Beirut. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Jamie Eyre and I have the privilege of leading Embrace's work with partners in the Middle East. We're really proud to run this seminar in Refugee Week and hear from two leaders of organisations who are really living the call we have as Christians to welcome the stranger, showing love and hospitality. Contrary to popular opinion and what you often hear in the media and the press, most displaced people in the Middle East stay within the region, with only small numbers coming to Europe. The conditions in countries like Lebanon, Iraq, and Egypt are far more challenging than they are here, but that doesn't stop our Christian partners from welcoming and supporting refugees. As such, the remarkable work of our partners can serve as both an example and an inspiration to us here in the UK. So let me open by introducing and welcoming our first speaker, Catherine Mourtada. A teacher by training, Catherine is a co-founder of Tahaddi Lebanon and a director of education and programs there. Tahaddi is a word that you may be familiar with if you're an Arabic speaker. It means challenge. Tahaddi is an NGO based in the informal settlement of Hay El Ghab in southern Beirut. It offers holistic support to families facing extreme economic hardship and through education, health and psychosocial services and advocacy. Tahaddi was first set up to serve the needs of the marginalised ethnic Lebanese Dom community. Today it works with vulnerable people, Lebanese and Syrian refugees alike, as well as migrant workers, stateless individuals and others who struggle to access essential services because of poverty, discrimination or legal status. The organisation remains committed to the community development model of its founders with the aim of reflecting God's compassion in all that it does. Catherine, welcome. It's lovely to see you online and thank you for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you, Jamie. It's a privilege to be with you this evening. A bit before you asked me how many hours of electricity we had in Lebanon, and I said we have a maximum of 6 hours of electricity per day, but thank God we have solar power as far as I'm concerned, but this is not the case, of course, of most of the less fortunate families and poor families living in Lebanon with 35 degrees yesterday, a bit better today. Last week, Farah, our speech therapist, told me this very touching story. As she was sitting at her desk, her door swung open and Ali, one of her young clients, sat on his chair and indicated he was ready for a speech therapy session. Shortly after, an out-of-breath mother followed him in and explained to Farah that as soon as Ali woke up that morning, he opened the door and ran towards the center, catching her off guard. She couldn't stop him. Ali had first come to the education center several months earlier with an exhausted mother who had been told she might find help in our center. Although he was 5 years old, Ali wasn't talking and was out of control, obeying only when harshly disciplined. Initially, Farah had a very hard time with him, but she set boundaries, and soon Ali calmed down, becoming very cooperative and making huge progress. Farah asked his mother to get his hearing tested, and it turned out that Ali needed hearing aids. This might have been the reason behind his silence and his misbehavior due to so much frustration. Unfortunately, Ali and his family had later to leave the area because they could no longer afford the rent there. However, they returned 6 months later because the father couldn't find work elsewhere, and the work opportunities in Beirut are slightly better for Syrian refugees. What's more, they were desperate for Ali to resume his sessions as he had regressed and starting behaving aggressively again. The day after their return, Ali had escaped from the room they had just rented to run to the center and straight up to Farah's office, as if knowing she held the key to unlocking his ability to communicate. Unfortunately, to this day, we have not been able to secure the funds to help the family with the high costs of the much needed hearing aids for Ali. That story that Farah told me was, I thought I would begin with it because it's a touching one. Can you please put slide number 1? Okay, so as you are reading, Lebanon has been a country at war since the brutal aggression on Gaza after the horrible, unfortunate, yet not surprising events of October 6. Lebanon is not only at war in its southern part with the impact you are reading on the Lebanese and Syrian families living in the south, but it has also been struggling with an economic crisis that has seen its currency devalue dramatically. In 2019, $1 was equivalent to 1,500 Lebanese pounds. It is now equivalent to 90,000 Lebanese pounds. Additionally, Lebanon is in the midst of a political crisis, having been almost 2 years without an elected president and with a government that has resigned and is only handling current affairs. The country is also experiencing a social crisis due to the economic collapse, political unrest, a high level of corruption, and the presence of approximately 1.5 million refugees, half of whom are unregistered and entered illegally through a highly porous border, facilitated by a network of both Lebanese and Syrian smugglers. I'm talking about 1.5 million of Syrian refugees. We have another kind of 400,000 of other refugees. This important number of refugees makes Lebanon the country hosting the largest number of refugees per capita and per square kilometer in the world. And it's true till now. Poverty in Lebanon has more than tripled over the past decade, reaching 44% of the total population, according to a new World Bank report released on May 23, 2024, a month ago, with 90% of the Syrian population struggling with extreme poverty. I think you can put now the next slide. Tahaddi has been working in the extremely poor neighborhood you see now on this picture since its inception in the late 90s. The NGO was officially created in 2008. The area is a melting pot of families from Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, other Arab countries, in addition of migrant workers from Bangladesh and Ethiopia. Most of the area is considered an illegal settlement, so the municipality has very limited access and does little to improve the infrastructure for the several thousand families living there. I took this picture from the education center, so this is what we see from the center. What is Tahaddi doing in a region that has been plagued by extreme poverty for decades? Remembering that Jesus used to walk with people, gently accompanying them on their path of life, the two co-founders began by walking tirelessly for a few years from shack to shack, with families calling us to treat an injured child or ask for medical advice. We soon realized that the population had very limited access to health and education, and given that this was our respective area of expertise, as mentioned before, it was naturally to start setting up a small dispensary and 2 classrooms for illiterate children who were not attending school. At the time, there were no Syrian children, only men who came to Lebanon to work and send money back to their families in Syria. When the war broke out in 2011, the first displaced families arrived and children not attending school started knocking at the door of our center. The first lessons we organized took place after school hours with all the Lebanese students helping us to teach math and Arabic to the Syrian children. With the arrival of funds, we expanded our facilities, built a second and then the third part to the education center. Today, we cater for more than 600 children in 7 different non-formal education programs. We started with a 4-year primary program. We now have an 8-year curriculum, including a youth transition program for young people in their last 2 years of education, a 3-year preschool program, after which Lebanese and Syrian children can enter public school, and a class for children with special needs, which Embrace has faithfully and generously funded, believing with us in inclusion, allowing us also to support the parents and siblings of these children with different abilities. In addition, we also offer a homework support program for children enrolled in public schools, I Learn at Home program for all the illiterate preteens and teens, and informal vocational courses in carpentry and sewing. We are also proud of the diversity of our team, with over 50 people at the TEC, Tahaddi Education Center, and 85 employees in total. They are recruited and chosen for their ability to work with children and adults from different backgrounds, and their willingness to understand how poverty affects children in terms of cleanliness, for example, when there's no drinking water or no water at all in the rooms, and when financial means are very low. They all have a university degree in the subject they teach and are hired without distinction on the basis of their religion, nationality, social background, or external appearance. Can you tell from the pictures you are seeing who is a Syrian and who is a Lebanese? Of course not. Our center is one of the rare educational places where both Syrian and Lebanese children learn, prepare science projects, play, laugh, joke, become friends, visit each other, and like all children, sometimes have conflicts together. From ZFD, a German NGO committed to peace building, has been auditing our education center this year and its practices to suggest improvements. Some of their findings were both touching and eye-opening for us. They wrote, "The children who attend the TEC and their parents have reported that they feel provided for and safe. The education center acts as the father of the community, which is a major reason why parents and children have such a high degree of trust and feel connected to it." The Forum ZFD team also mentioned the attention paid to details in the center, such as keeping it clean, aesthetically attractive, and the way classes are set up has inspired our team to call it an oasis. This setup provides comfort and a safe haven to the children and adults who attend programs in the center. Karim, in our 2-year youth transition program, had to move recently to the already crowded room of relatives with his family of 4 because they could not pay the rent that had just been increased. Karim, the youngest of his family, is juggling school and work in order to help his family make ends meet. His father has a body worn out by work and cannot do the jobs offered to Syrian men, mainly in construction, carrying heavy loads or pushing carts of fruit and vegetables to sell on the roads. Although his family put pressure on him to leave the program, Karim remained determined to continue his studies. He found support from his older sister, age 18, whose dream was to learn to read and write, and who enrolled in the adult literacy course in our center. She's one of the most enthusiastic learners and is making great progress. Tahaddi is a place where not only the children are taught, but where parents are also invited to be part of the adventure. Parents can share their burdens and questions at parents' meeting or positive parenting groups. They give their feedback on the activities. And for example, the idea of the I Learn at Home program came from Syrian mothers who had older children who couldn't find a place in schools or non-formal education centers. Our was full already. So they asked us if we could help them teach their children at home. And we thought it was a very good idea. And we chose 6 well-educated women who are trained every week to give literacy and numeracy lessons to over 100 children altogether. So this is the slide here is one of the class in I Learn at Home. So in the house of one of the tutors, they have floor tables that were made by one of our former students who is a carpenter. And one of the children has also a problem. He cannot walk. He has a disease. And almost in a lot of our classes, we have children with either physical disabilities or language delays or problems that are integrated in our classes. Also, through a safeguarding and an interfaith dialogue program integrated in our curriculum in the form of weekly lesson and exchanges, our students learn to respect the beliefs, social backgrounds, and physical differences of others. They learn to protect themselves physically and emotionally, to understand what bullying is and how to respond to it, and to use the internet safely. Tahaddi also runs a health center where consultations and vaccinations are free of charge, a psychosocial center which organizes mental health and well-being sessions, and where adults and children can receive psychological help. A lot of the children and their parents coming from Syria have seen horrible things. We had some of the children drawing themselves playing football with a head, and they told us this is what Daesh would force them to do, playing football with the head of someone they had beheaded. So horrible things that they need to process, parents and children. Also, young Syrian and Lebanese couples can also visit our legal office where they can get legal and financial help with birth and marriage registration, which is crucial in preventing statelessness. Tahaddi also provides social aid in the form of food vouchers, essential household items such as fans, heaters, mattresses, cooking appliances, and gas bottles to Lebanese and Syrian families who, as you understand well by now, are all struggling to make ends meet and cannot afford the basic necessities. We're also providing a small livelihood for 18 Syrian and Lebanese women in a sewing atelier that Embrace knows well. However, despite this comprehensive intervention, which is Tahaddi's trademark in a way, poverty is so intense that families, both Syrian and Lebanese, have to resort to negative coping mechanisms, such as contracting debts, the sale of belongings, early marriage, and very often child labor. As you can see from the photos, I have contrasted with the children attending Tahaddi's education center or one of our education programs. A lot of children do collect plastic directly in the bins, in the containers, all along Beirut streets, and then go and sell them for a ridiculous price per kilo. So it's a very unclean, unsafe, and work, and a lot of exploitation. Both Syrian and Lebanese children would do this. So very sadly, today, around 50% of our oldest children have to work before or after school in order to provide an extra income for their families to survive. And just on Thursday, last Thursday, Abdesalam described his work to us and said that he's starting every day at 7 in the morning at the market, where he helps carry crates of fruit and vegetables. And he comes to the center at 11 a.m. And because he attends the second shift, we have 2 shifts, so we could accommodate as many children as possible. And then he returns to work from 4 to 8 in the evening. He works 6 days a week for $20 per week. Despite all this, we believe that Tahaddi's holistic approach with never favors one group over another has contributed to a degree of social stability in an extremely unstable region where gunfire is frequent, gun ownership is common, crime is high, and drugs are readily available. Tahaddi is also inspired by the leave no one behind principle. This is a principle from the UN. It's a transformative promise of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It is a commitment of all UN member states to eradicate poverty, end discrimination and exclusion, and reduce the inequalities and vulnerabilities that leave people behind. And this is also what Tahaddi humbly strives to do with the invaluable support of its stakeholders, be they community members, participants, staff, or donors who give their time, pray for us, and raise funds to keep this work going. Leave no one behind is a principle that finds a perfect example in what Jesus did in his 3 years of public life. He touched the untouchable, spoke to the outcast, ate with the marginalized, sharply criticized and challenged the establishment, and paid for it with his life. we who call ourselves believers can do no less for the growing groups of people in our countries who are becoming excluded, persona non grata, because of their origins and their desperate search for a safe place to live. Although I work, talk, exchange, laugh, and drink coffee every day with people who have sought refuge in Lebanon, I didn't want to talk about refugees without taking time to sit down with a group of them and listen to what they had to say. And this is what I did last week also. I chose our Island at Home tutors, 6 women I know very well because I sit with them every week and we prepare together the math lesson for the week to come. And I asked them this question: what does it mean to be a refugee today in Lebanon? And I felt I had opened Pandora's box. The women just wanted to talk, and tell their stories, sometimes all together. They had so many things to say, so much suffering to share. I have scribbled down what they said, and here is a little summary to conclude this presentation. Being a refugee in Lebanon, they said, means being spat at, hearing insults, being afraid to leave our home, not feeling safe on the roads, feeling powerless and very vulnerable, fearing that your son or husband who hasn't come back home from work at the usual time has been detained or beaten. Being a refugee is feeling very unwelcome these days, being a burden, having no rights, not fitting in. But where do we fit? They said. Where do we belong? And that was very heartbreaking. We have lost or left our homes and possessions in Syria. Our eldest sons are old enough to be forcibly conscripted into the Syrian army. There are no jobs, no schools in the villages where we come from, and almost no basic goods because of the economic crisis in Syria too, and the sanctions imposed on the country. Several of our children were born in Lebanon, and one of them recently asked if he was Lebanese or Palestinian. Another asked when he would be Lebanese, as he had been here for so long. Our hearts break and hurt when we think of our future and that of our children. So on this I think this is the last slide. It's a Syrian refugee family, and it's an example of the holistic approach of Tahaddi. The little girl is a Down syndrome girl, and this is why the mother came to see us. And then we discovered she had 3 other children, 2 school-age children. One was actually working the whole day at the market, also carrying crates, and he's only 10. And the girl was doing all the chores at home. She was 13 at that time. And in the house, there's no water, which is terrible. And it's a very small room. So and there was also no gas bottle and nothing to cook on except a camping gas. So we provided a gas bottle and a better kind of oven for them to cook. And then the older girl was accepted in our Island at Home program this school year, and the boy is in our first year, although is already 9, but he could enter our first year at the Tahaddi Education Center. Thank you.
Catherine, thank you so much to take in and reflect upon there. Really good to hear your stories, your reflections, your thoughts, and to hear some live voices from the refugees that you work with. Thank you so much for what you shared. Really powerful, and we look forward to hearing more in conversation in a few minutes.
Thank you.
Let me shift gears and move from 1B to another, and let's move our sights slightly closer to home, to Bristol. I'd like to welcome Dan Green. Dan is a new friend to embrace. Dan, it's great to welcome you into our family. Dan is the co-founder and director of Bridges for Communities, a Bristol-based charity that connects people of different cultures and faiths and plays an active role in welcoming refugees and people seeking asylum. After spending 8 years working in the Middle East and running cultural exchange programs for young people, Dan moved back to Bristol, and he brought his love for other people back with him. He now leads a team that help refugees adjust to life in the UK, connecting them into local communities through befriending, sewing groups, walking in nature, community feasts, and stepping stones towards employment. Dan is passionate about the role that volunteers, community groups, and churches, so that's us, can play in this work, as well as the friendships that grow and change in our own perceptions as we get involved. Welcome the stranger. Dan, it's a pleasure to have you share with us. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Jamie, and thank you again, Catherine, for all you shared. It's always humbling and wonderful at the same time to hear the work that people like you are doing. And good evening to everyone who's with us. As Jamie said, my name's Dan. I'm based in Bristol. I live here with my wife and 3 kids, and I lead Bridges for Communities, which is a small charity based here in Bristol. A large part of our work is supporting and welcoming refugees, many of whom are from the Middle East. But as the name Bridges implies, there's a kind of overarching goal as well to help connect people of different cultures and faiths here in the UK, to build friendships, to grow in their understanding of one another, and to learn to live well with difference, which is something that we feel is not done enough here in Bristol and elsewhere. And my wife and I founded Bridges back in 2010. But one of our key experiences that led us to start this charity was actually just down the road from where Catherine is and works with Tahaddi in a refugee camp called Burj Al Barajni. Some of you will have heard of it. And it really, I think it's a 5 or 10 minute drive from Tahaddi. So it's wonderful for me to feel that connection with the work that you're doing there. And I just have huge respect for you and other Embrace partners, because the circumstances and situations that you work in are extremely difficult and challenging, but the work you do is so precious and so vital. And I think the first thing that I want people joining us tonight to hear is please keep supporting and cheering on those Embrace partners in the work that they're doing in the Middle East. After a year in Lebanon, my wife and I moved to Jordan. And, we had this experience in Burj Al Barajni. It was our first time really to sit down with people who had been forcibly displaced. And that feeling and that learning has still not left me, of what it was like to talk to ordinary people, people who felt like, like it could be me and you, but whose lives had been turned upside down by circumstances that were beyond their control, and that find themselves trying to rebuild their lives and establish lives in a foreign land. And we had a similar experience in Jordan, sometimes with Palestinians, sometimes with Iraqis who had been displaced after the invasion and the downfall of Saddam, and then with Syrians from 2011. And those people, I still remember some of the faces of people in the north of Jordan who had just come across the border with the clothes that they were wearing and were living in temporary apartments or garages, and again, just trying to come to terms with what life had thrown at them. It was incredibly sobering and humbling, and it's, for me, still a big motivator behind the work that we now do here in Bristol. So what's the connection? Well, when we came back in 2012, I don't think we would have anticipated or expected that over the next few years, the city council here would resettle around 100 families from Syria. So that was about 500 people, along with smaller numbers from Iraq and Iran and other countries in the region. And our journey with Bridges has really been a very gradual one, of working alongside the council, but with other local partners, with churches, to help welcome and support people as they rebuild their lives here. And that also includes other nationalities from people all over the world. So Venezuela, Myanmar, Uganda, Sri Lanka, but a significant percentage of people from the Middle East and countries that people here tonight would be particularly connected with. And I think that's the second thing that I want to really highlight tonight, is that strong interconnection between, the work that people like Catherine are doing there in Beirut, and the role that Christians and others can play here in this country in welcoming and supporting refugees who arrive in your village or your town or your city. Just as a reminder, people can seek asylum or sanctuary here in the UK for a number of different reasons. Sometimes it's because they're displaced by war, but it could also be because they're suffering persecution due to religious beliefs or political views or sexual orientation or other reasons. So we don't know by looking at somebody why they may be seeking asylum here. But we have welcomed Lebanese refugees, we have welcomed Syrians and Palestinians who've come from Lebanon. And so that's the strong connection that I'm feeling and overlap. And for those who support Embrace Partners, there on the ground in the Middle East, I also want to encourage you to be thinking as we talk tonight about how you can respond where you are here in the UK. So just to describe briefly what that looks like for us at Bridges and how we do it, I'll just tell you a little bit about some of the programs that we run, but really each of these is just a response that has come about as we've learned, as we've talked to people, as we've found out about the needs that they have and also the desires and the hopes that they have as they start life here. And I hope that as I share them, there might be ideas that could be useful for you as well, where you live and work here in the UK. So the first one, and a bit of a fundamental really, is what we call befriending. And that is just coming alongside, spending time with people, with individuals, with families who are new to the UK, who are either seeking asylum here or have been given refugee status here and are starting that phase of life. But to have a local person who comes alongside them, who listens, who maybe tries to learn a little bit of their language, and is just a friendly face. I think we shouldn't underestimate the huge value that has. And I know for me and Karen, in that brief time we had in the Middle East, the welcome and the hospitality and the help and support that people offered to us is something that we will never forget, and that we want to see people who arrive here in our country also receive in a greater measure. So the second thing that we do is we provide some cultural awareness sessions or orientation sessions. When you arrive in a new place, it can be overwhelming, disorienting, you can really feel lost. And quite a lot of our systems and processes here in the UK are quite confusing and quite challenging. A lot of paperwork involved. So just providing some information, which we call Welcome to the UK. I think Jamie mentioned we also gather people around food. Food is a great shared language across the world. It might taste different in different places, but we all love and enjoy sharing food. So we have a program called Peace Feasts. You can look it up on our website. There's a resource to help you do that where you are if you would like to. But it's basically people coming together around a meal and starting conversations and starting friendship in that way. And then the other thing to remember is that people sometimes just need a break from the challenge of settling in, from all of the thinking, all of the language learning, etc. So we've organized trips to the beach. We've organized Eid celebrations. Community is one of the things that many people miss when they arrive here in the UK, partly because of how our society works, and of course, because people have said goodbye to loved ones and often feel far away. So things like Eid and Christmas and other celebrations can be a really meaningful time for people to gather and connect with a new community that they're building. A couple of other kind of innovations. Honestly, we've made most of this up as we've gone along, but we have a walking program, which is called Walk With Me. So similar to befriending, but people getting out into nature. A lot of people that we work with in a very urban environment, many, especially those who are in temporary accommodation hotels, are often stuck in their accommodation, afraid to go out, not sure if they're welcome, not sure if the reception will be positive. So to get out into nature with somebody else and to observe and talk about what you're observing is something that is beneficial to them. But we also find that for our volunteers and for those of us on the team, it's something that does us good as well. And then a couple of things around employability, because the sense of purpose and the right to work and bring in some income is a huge aspect for all of us in terms of identity and dignity, as well as providing for ourselves and for our families. And it's something that our system here in the UK actually makes very challenging for people, especially for people who are still waiting on their asylum decision. They're actually not allowed to work for money. There are some exceptions to that, and people can volunteer, which can be a good thing. But actually anything, once they have refugee status, where they can begin to work and earn and use the skills that they have, because people come with a lot of skills and assets that they can bring to our cities and our towns. So one of the ways we do this is through language. You know, that people are often told, well, you need to learn English. You need to improve your English before you can get a job or really contribute. But actually, we live in a city where there is a demand for Arabic, for Somali, for Farsi, for Pashto. So we've created a program called Refulingua, where people teach their native language to Bristolians. They get paid a little bit in the process. Sometimes we get to hear amusing stories about what this looks like in reality as it happens, and some of the misunderstandings that sometimes go on. But it's a beautiful thing to see happening. And then another commonality with Catherine's work is around sewing. I know that you have a sewing project for women. And again, it's a shared language, an interest that many people have, and a skill that people bring to this country. So last summer, we had a wonderful exhibition at an art gallery where Afghan women and others contributed things that they had made, and it was celebrated. And yeah, being creative together can be another great way of building bridges, building those friendships and connections, and helping people settle in. Just a very quick word, if I can, Jamie, about the bigger picture, because all of this, of course, is happening at a time where the rhetoric and the debate around immigration and around refugees is, in the headlines, even today, news about that. And I think we're really in a tussle about, as a country, how do we respond to these challenges? And they're not challenges that the UK is unique in facing. Many countries, and in comparison to a country like Lebanon, the challenge for the UK is, much, much smaller as a proportion. But it is a challenge, and it is something that it is gaining a lot of publicity. And I think the narratives, unfortunately, have been hardening. People's positions towards refugees have been hardening. And we see that in things like the illegal migration bill that became law last year, the Rwanda scheme, of course, which is in the headlines, today's news about the European Convention on Human Rights, whether the UK will continue to be part of that. And for me, the sad thing is where politics and, simple slogans like "Stop the Boats" lead to, or can lead to, a dehumanizing of ordinary human beings, people that we've seen, like in the images that Catherine shared, and where complex and nuanced issues are reduced to very simplistic or binary ones. So I think that's part of the challenge, and that's part of the bigger picture that anyone in this country who's seeking to welcome refugees needs to think through, and we need to talk about.
So much, Dan. That was really, really interesting to hear you speak about your work, and also about what led you into your work as well. So thank you so much. And also, Catherine, fascinating to hear you talk as well. So just to briefly introduce myself, I'm Katie Lewis, as Jamie said. I work in the communications team here at Embrace. And just for the next kind of 20 minutes or so, we're going to just be having a bit of back and forth, kind of a facilitated conversation. So just picking up on some of the different points that you both raised in your speaking slots, and just unpacking some of those issues that you alluded to. So I'm just going to start with something fairly open, just to kind of throw it out there. So my first question really is, what is the biggest challenge that you face in your work to support refugees? Catherine, perhaps we could start with you, and then Dan, we'll move to you.
First, I would like to say to Dan that I really hope the various families that are waiting to go somewhere out of Lebanon will go to Bristol, because all what you said is so important when refugees go to another country. Actually, we never had families going to England, but we had several of them going to Canada, and we stayed in touch with quite a lot of them. And I know how hard it is, especially this hotel phase where they have nothing to do within four walls and everything is new and they don't know what they can do, what they cannot do. And then later when they are kind of left to themselves, and how important it was for those who had especially a church around them, or people who were willing to help and support these families. So thank you so much, Dan, for the incredible work you do. It is very, very important. Just also to say, one of the families, the first families who went to Canada, when they left, the girl, one of the girls, and she was 14 at that time, said, I will do something to give back what you did for us. And I thought it was really sweet of her, and I forgot about it. And 2 years ago, we received money from this girl who is now finished nursing school, and gave a donation to Tahaddi to pay back what we had given to her for a couple of years. So our biggest challenge with refugees right now is, right now we feel a bit powerless, because yes, the discourse has been extremely difficult from some people in Lebanon, really pressuring for a return to Syria, which is for a lot of families extremely difficult. And we have seen quite a lot of families going back, especially at the end of the school year, because they feel this is the only thing they can do, or fathers would send their children and the wife back to Syria, often to relatives, because they have no place to be, and they will see if it's feasible. Otherwise, they will surely come back in the same way they came, which is through smugglers. So this is heartbreaking for both the children, the parents, and us, to see what is happening now. But we cannot do it. We cannot do anything.
And for us, I think there's some similarities, but I would say the two biggest challenges that we face are, first of all, just observing the overwhelming need and the challenges that people who are seeking asylum in the UK face. Some people do arrive with a lot of trauma from their previous experiences or from the journey that they've been on. And our system makes it very difficult for people to start life or rebuild life here. So our team, our volunteers are, regularly hearing difficult stories as they journey alongside people, as they try to navigate that process, often facing rejection, living with a lot of fear, and not really able to move forwards with life while they wait for an asylum decision. So, I mean, we probably don't have time to try and dig into the reasons behind that. The government talks about having deterrence so that people don't feel that it's too easy to come to this country, or that there's too much reward if they do. But whatever the reason, it is made very difficult for people. And, we've had lots of news about the numbers of people that have been in those temporary hotels. And hotels can sound like, that must be a great option or a fairly okay option, but we've been into those hotels, and the situation, the circumstances are very difficult, with people sharing rooms with people that they don't know, that may be from groups or countries that they don't trust or have experienced trauma through. The uncertainty of not knowing when they will be able to move forwards with life, very limited means financially. So I think just observing that and feeling like the need can be overwhelming and that you can't meet it is one of the big challenges for anybody working in this field here in the UK. And then the second major challenge, I think, relates to that narrative. I think, Catherine talked about attitudes that she's hearing towards Syrian refugees in Lebanon. And I think, that is reflected a bit here and really across Europe and more broadly as well, a hardening of narratives towards immigration. and an increase in Europe, at least, towards a kind of nationalist and populist politics. So I am worried about that. And I'm worried about the UK moving backwards on its commitment towards the Refugee Convention, which we signed in 1951. Even though we're still signatories to it, I would say that the illegal migration bill that came in last year, effectively, to all intents and purposes, if it was fully enacted, would bring an end to people's ability to claim asylum here in the UK. So yeah, extremely concerning. And I think while often you feel powerless about that and it's beyond your control to do much about, it is a challenge to work within that context for all of us that are.
And for us, even NGOs had been a bit challenged because we were accused of helping refugees stay, unlike Lebanon, because we're helping them. So suddenly we were the bad ones, and that was so strange. There was a horrible billboard that had been paid by some extreme right parts of people in Lebanon, and we could read on them, undo the damage, and undo big UN do the damage, pointing to the UN also being responsible for this large amount of refugees, Syrian refugees in Lebanon. It's a complex, of course, it's very complex. Of course, there are problems, but it's horrible to throw it on refugees who actually are the victims of mismanagement, and first of all the victim of what happened in their own country.
I was actually going to ask how the sort of the negativity and the hostility that you mentioned, those attitudes kind of play out in terms of your daily work and how that impacts you. And I think actually what you just said kind of answers that question in terms of making what you do that much harder. And in a kind of a similar vein, Dan, I just wondered if you could speak a little bit about the attitudes in the host communities here in the UK. Is it one of hostility or hospitality? Obviously, we, as you've just alluded to, we are seeing more negative political rhetoric, but on that kind of grassroots level in the communities where you're working, what are you seeing? Are there any encouragements? Is it all as negative as some of the newspaper headlines would have us believe?
Yeah, it's definitely not that negative. While the kind of public debate around it can be depressing, the response that we consistently see from local people, including Christians and churches, is so encouraging. And the goodwill and the desire we see from people to give time and energy and money to support people who are displaced is massive. So we've never had any problem recruiting volunteers at Bridges. We have more than 100 volunteers who are the real heroes, I think, that are spending time out there each week befriending or, taking somebody to somewhere in the city to help them be more familiar, to build confidence, to go on those walks, to come to a feast. So yeah, I think when we look at the picture that's in front of us locally and talking to people that engage with our work, it's very encouraging. There is a tremendous amount of goodwill, but it's a mixed picture because at the same time, we know that there are people who don't engage with our work. We're very aware that, in a city like Bristol, which is actually known for being quite a segregated city, so there are parts of the city where particular communities have settled, or there are areas where people feel left behind or not listened to. Actually, part of the work of Bridges is to try and build a little bit of connection and conversation between different people. And so we're aware that there are people who are not in the room, that are not volunteering their time, who maybe do feel afraid or do feel overwhelmed. And I think it's important to say that there are challenges. I think none of the conversation around numbers and boats coming across from France. There aren't easy solutions, but we need to push for a more thought through, a more comprehensive, a more coordinated response from our country with other countries. It needs to be humane. It needs to also be fair and transparent. So I'm not pretending there's any easy answers to these things, and I'm really glad I'm not a politician. But I think it's a mixed picture. And, you know, just as a kind of a extreme example of where it can be worrying, around the asylum hotels where people have been put in temporary accommodation, those have become a bit of a magnet for some far-right groups to protest, to demonstrate, to express their fears or their anger. So yes, I think we kind of live in that tension between the encouragement of amazing volunteers who support this work and also the bigger picture.
That is very interesting. Yeah, so I thought maybe moving on to talk a little bit about faith. I'd love to hear from both of you how your faith motivates you to work in this space, which you know, it can be really challenging, and also perhaps how your faith has been impacted by your work with refugees. Catherine, perhaps we could start with you.
Yeah. I think my faith has been a lot shaped by my work and what I heard other people tell, especially when it you know, hard stories, not only about refugees, but also the local Lebanese or Dom families. I have admired their faith, praising God often, even in the midst of very hard situations. And I was wondering if I would have the faith to praise God if I had been through so much. I've certainly, I think, become more humble because really I do not understand what it is to be a refugee. Even if I am with them all the time, almost every day, we work together. Still, I don't know what it is really to live in the conditions of life they are. It's very tough. So I think to know what is my anchor has helped me go through so much pain that I see around me. And also because as I mentioned, our team is diverse. I think I've also become more humble considering the other faith. And I think God is good and has there's a lot of space for other people and different people. And this is, I should never put things in a box. My box has really grown, and I have been challenged to think out of the box in terms of faith. But certainly to have faith, to know to whom I belong, has been very, very important to keep the direction and to develop also this Tahaddi that is now in the hands of a big team. Thank God.
Yeah, and I think it's hard to know where to start, to be honest, because I think my faith has absolutely underpinned and been a major reason why I've got involved in this work. But it's also not the only reason. And I feel it's important to say that because as Christians, we don't have a monopoly on compassion. At Bridges, we have teammates from different faith backgrounds and people of no faith who, just as human beings, you know, seeing people in difficult circumstances is enough for us to reach out and to show love and compassion to each other. But as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, I think always asking that question, what's our role? What do we see in Jesus? And he was someone who consistently crossed boundaries, who challenged the status quo, who taught us inspiring stories like the Good Samaritan, challenging stories like the Good Samaritan. So yeah, I think his example in teaching is absolutely fundamental in motivation. But I also share that sense with Catherine of maybe learning and walking a bit more humbly in my faith as a result of relationships. Actually, it was a friend of mine in Lebanon called Rabia who had a huge impact on me as we used to walk down the Corniche, the waterfront together, and we would talk about life, and faith was part of that. And it was a huge opportunity for me to learn about someone as a Muslim or from a Muslim background and the perceptions and stereotypes that I had that needed challenging, actually. And I think that has just continued in our work with refugees of different faiths and of different cultures, that there is always something to learn. There is often a lot of common ground that we can build on. And yeah, there is a sense of my view of God getting bigger through this experience of getting to know the other, of getting to know people who maybe see life differently. So yeah, I think it's always a opportunity to grow in our own faith as we have these conversations with people.
That's really interesting. I'm going to follow up on what you've just said in just a moment's time. I'm going to ask you kind of what role Christians in the UK and churches in the UK can play in welcoming refugees, whether it's at a grassroots level or broader political level. So I'm going to ask you that in just a moment. But first of all, I'm just going to move over to you, Catherine. And, you know, you've spoken a lot about the challenges that refugees face in Lebanon. And I just wondered, you know, what is needed in Lebanon at, you know, at a political level in order to, you know, to bring about safety and security for refugees in Lebanon?
Oh, it's a big question. At the political level. Well, you know, we're living in a void, political void, corruption, the power of the strongest are reigning in the streets of Beirut and Lebanon. So, for example, if refugees are now being beaten or subject to any unfair treatment, they cannot go to the police and say what happened to them, because they're going to be arrested, because they do not have a valid residence permit to be in Lebanon. So only 20% of the registered Syrian, which is half of the 1.5 million Syrians in Lebanon, have a residence permit. The others do not, which is a catastrophe, actually. So I don't know, at a political level, maybe to elect a president and have a government, because we have been almost for 2 years without a president and a government. Yeah, it's beyond me. But then regulations and laws that would regulate the presence of and the work of the Syrian refugees. You know, Lebanon is not hasn't signed the Treaty of 1951, so they do not recognize the status of refugee. People are not officially called refugees, but displaced people in Lebanon. And they cannot work except in 3 areas, which are agriculture, cleaning, and construction. And without any regulation, of course, they have been working in a lot of other jobs and exploited, of course, because they pay half of what they would pay a Lebanese. They do not have any benefit. And of course, it is very frustrating for the Lebanese, and they feel they are taking their job. And in a way, who is employing them? These are Lebanese employers who are taking advantage of paying and not paying taxes, etc., etc. So yes, the refugees are a strain on the country's infrastructure and a burden on the job market. But again, this is not completely their fault. And it's the absence of laws and legislation that, we call it in Arabic, fawda, the chaos of what we are experiencing now in Lebanon that led to this unfortunate situation.
Yeah, that is very illuminating. So moving back to you, Dan, if you could just briefly unpack, you know, what more can Christians and churches here in the UK do to support refugees?
Well, when you say briefly, how long do we have, Katie? Because there is so much. But I think the first thing is just to start where you're at and do the little bit that you feel able to do and start there. That's definitely been our journey in Bristol, and things have then grown and developed. And I've talked to lots of other great organizations and people working around the UK and churches too, who that's been their experience too. So I think just coming alongside, whether that is kind of as a befriender or just getting to know and talking to someone and being that welcoming, friendly face, is something that can genuinely make a big difference to someone who is new to the country and likely has a degree of anxiety or fear about what life is going to be like here. The second thing is around hospitality, and housing is a massive need here in Bristol, but I know around the UK as well. This is one of the main barriers to refugees being able to resettle and live here. So we saw an incredible response through the Homes to Ukraine scheme. I think 117,000 Ukrainians arrived. I think around half of those were with host families, maybe more. So we know that there is a lot of willingness, but if you could reach out to groups like Refugee Welcome Homes or others, if you have a spare room, if you have somewhere that people can stay, there are ways to do that. Although the UK is not creating other resettlement routes like we did for Ukraine at the moment, even for those who are here, there may be a way to assist with accommodation. But if it's not accommodation, it could be something as simple as offering a cup of coffee, inviting somebody who shows up at your church back for lunch on a Sunday. I think that art of hospitality is something that many cultures around the world really value and celebrate, and something that, honestly, sometimes as Brits, we need to remember and relearn. And I say that as a Brit, but it can make a huge difference and be quite a small thing. The third thing is for churches, I think thinking about what you've already got and you could offer into the mix. So particularly the use of space for people and for communities that are kind of trying to get established and have limited means and limited income. The offer of a room, the offer of a community kitchen that they could use. Again, one of the challenges for those in temporary accommodation is just access to food that feels familiar. And so you may be able to do something in a very manageable way that makes a big difference. The fourth thing I put down is just about speaking up, about advocacy, and speaking up for truth in a gracious and constructive way. We have ways and mechanisms that we can do this in this country. So writing to your MP, engaging with them. I mean, we have an election coming up, so there will be hustings taking place across the country. You could go to that and you could prepare a question that is linked to what we're talking about tonight. And you could maybe ask about whether they will uphold the UK's commitment to the Refugee Convention or to the European Convention on Human Rights if they are elected. Those kind of things do make a difference, because politicians do respond to pressure and to people showing willingness or opinion on something. So we can speak up and we can make a difference in that kind of way. The last thing is just about partnering and using resources, organizations like the Sanctuary Foundation led by Krish Kandaya, or Together with Refugees, which I know that Embrace partners with. That's over 600 organizations that are calling for a kinder, fairer approach to refugees. They've got a well thought through ask to the government on that. So there may be ways that churches and Christians can also get involved in that way. Yeah, so there's lots, and I'll be happy to liaise with people about others after the session if that's helpful.
Thank you, Dan. That's great. And very, very practical. I'm sure there's a lot that we can take away there. So now we're going to move into our audience Q&A section. So we don't have a huge amount of time left. So just under 10 minutes for this. So there'll be quite kind of quick fire questions, but we do have a few questions that have come in. So thank you to those of you who've put forward your questions. So I'm going to start with one for Catherine. And the question, Catherine, has anything surprised you in your work with refugees?
Because we have been in this area where poverty is the common denominator of all these different families, the coming of refugees who, of course, were poor already in Syria, coming most of them from villages around Aleppo. They kind of blended in this, and unfortunately, in this area. Also, they were shocked because they came all from rural places, and they arrived in a very dry urban landscape with and most of them were like they had a piece of land, even a very small one. They used to grow their own vegetable, and here in Hail Gharbi where we work, there's nothing, no land to plant, nothing to try, and even if they would try to plant something, it would be stolen. So it is hard. So what touched me, I think, is their resilience. And their willingness to have their children be at school and educated, which has always been very challenging. The public school has accepted a number of children, and there are a lot of problems there too. With them, the Syrian children learn in the afternoon as the Lebanese children learned in the morning. In our center, of course, they all together, which, as I mentioned, is very rare that Lebanese and Syrian children actually learn together. What was the question? What was your original question?
Oh, so I'm sorry, Catherine. The question was just what surprised you in your, or has anything surprised you in your work with refugees?
Yeah, so the resilience, because they came with all what they had seen and experienced, which was extremely difficult, and their willingness to really put their children into education. And they struggled a lot. They're still struggling, and it has always been extremely difficult. But they want it, and some of the children are super bright.
Thank you, Catherine. And a question for you, Dan, that's come in. What percentage of refugees that you work with actually get refugee status here in the UK? And how long do they have to wait for a decision?
That's a tough question, actually. I don't have an exact figure. I know that nationally, between 2021 and 2023, it was about 63% of those who applied for asylum were granted asylum when their case was heard. Some of those that were rejected would have gone to appeal, and many of those would have then been granted kind of on the second or third try. The largest nationality that sought asylum last year were Afghans, and I think it was about a 95 or even higher percentage that were granted asylum. So it depends a lot on the nationality and the situation in that country, how quickly the government will kind of give the stamp of approval for asylum. Recently, the government fast-tracked several nationalities. And again, we could talk about why they may have done that in the run-up to an election, but try not to be too cynical about these things. And yes, it depends a lot on nationality and circumstances of the individual. So even the process of applying and then appeal, if you're rejected, is something that takes typically a long time. We're talking months and often even years. We know people who've been waiting for over 5 years to be granted asylum. Their case would have been heard earlier than that, but they may have been rejected because the government felt that they didn't have a strong enough case, that they couldn't prove that they were in danger in their country of origin, or the government felt that they should have claimed asylum in France or Germany or a country that they had previously been in. So it's quite complicated to provide that kind of proof, especially if you imagine fleeing your house in a dangerous circumstance. You're not normally thinking about gathering evidence that you will be able to show the British Home Office months later when you arrive. So yeah, it really varies. I'm sorry, I can't give a precise figure or number, but it varies case to case.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like there's not a one size fits all answer to that question. So a question for Catherine, and then I'm conscious of time, and we're probably going to have to close off. And I do have a final question for both of you in just a moment, but just a question for you, Catherine, first. So somebody's asking, we've been hearing about the escalating situation on the border with southern Lebanon and Israel, and the increasing number of internally displaced people as a result of what is happening there. So what will that mean for your work in your community?
Look, I just received something on my phone now, Israeli warning to the Lebanese government: either Hezbollah retreats beyond the Litani River now, or it's war. So we're receiving threats of this kind all the time. But the families who were displaced have been welcome in their families in Beirut or other regions of Lebanon. They thought it would be for one month, 2 months. It has been now over 8 months. So it has been extremely difficult because these families have lost everything. There's no money. Their own family who have been welcoming them are tired. And they're also not very rich. So no, it's really bad. And the 20,000 and more children without are not at school, are online, which is also really difficult. And the Syrian families have gone to the Bekaa, where they feel they are a little bit more welcome. But they have been in very difficult situations in shelters that are absolutely not great places to stay.
Yeah, it does sound like a very difficult and very challenging situation for the people who are affected by this, and something that, you know, we can continue to remember them and uphold people like that in our prayers. So moving on to the final question, just to sort of end this part of the webinar. Somebody's asking, what message would Catherine and Dan wish to give the next Prime Minister of the UK? So as we've spoken about, we've got an election coming up here in the UK. So yeah, potentially a new Prime Minister next month. So what message would you give that person, whoever it is that's going to be taking the reins, whoever's going to be moving into number 10, what message would you give that person? Perhaps Dan, we'll start with you.
Yes, I can go first and have a go. I think I would want them to commit to going through a process where they develop an approach. It feels like things are very reactionary, very short term, and responding often to the loudest voices or the voices of most fear. So I would want them to know that I think there is still a tremendous amount of goodwill in the British people, and a desire for us to continue with our support for people seeking sanctuary. It's a long history. People often talk proudly about that, going right back to the Second World War and kinder transport and and lots since then. So I'd want them to commit to continuing that commitment to the Refugee Convention, but to working on a more comprehensive and long-term approach to these things, and not ones that just appease the loudest or the angriest voices.
And how about you, Catherine? What would your message be?
Well, I don't know if I can speak politics. And first, I want to really, I'm so thankful to the British people. I mean, the one who are in the streets every week to really just protest against what is happening in Gaza and Palestine. It's great, and it reconciliates me with human beings when I see all these people bravely and courageously week after week shouting for peace and ceasefire and free Palestine. But to the new Prime Minister, I would like to say, listen to your heart and do not talk to the lowest part of our humanity. The one that is lazy and easily convinced because it's a lazy choice to choose racism, to choose to be to choose to be to say English first, America first. You know, this kind of slogans are just. I mean, as Dan said, we are enriched in meeting other people of other faiths, of other countries, other habits. We should always be enriched with each other, never consider it as a threat. Or then before we are in the middle of a big chaos, make sure we have the right laws in place that will prevent things that are happening in Lebanon now, but I don't think they are happening in England right now. So yeah, I would tell him, listen to your heart and redirect the discussion towards humanity and the enrichment we can get from each other and our differences.
Catherine, Dan, thank you so much for all that you've shared. My mind is just abuzz with thoughts as I've listened to what you've brought before us. Over the past hour or so, we've heard from 2 pioneering organisations and their inspiring leaders, hearing about the teams of people who are treating refugees with great dignity and care. And I'm sure, like me, you come away challenged with a fresh desire to make a difference where you are. The role, as somebody said to me earlier on today, the role that we can play can make a difference. Our actions here in the UK, Catherine's actions, Catherine's team in Beirut, all our actions have international significance. And we care about these issues because God loves and cares for each one of us. We had some really brilliant practical ways from Dan, thank you for that, of simple things that you can do. It doesn't take a mountain to get involved with this. We can just step by step allow God to use us. To give you some more practical ideas, we've got a new webpage. I think it's already been put in the chat, but if you look at embraceme.org/refugees, you'll see some suggestions there. There's ideas about raising awareness, praying, giving, links to like-minded organisations where you can get involved. Refugee Welcome, as Dan mentioned. The opportunity to write to prospective MPs and challenge them on hustings. I think we should all get out and do that. There are also a range of other resources you can find on there. I just wanted to finish really by saying, Catherine and Dan, thank you so much for joining us. Katie, thanks for all that you've done in pulling us together, and the team in the background, all the unseen faces that you can't see but are making today possible. And thank you to all of us for joining us and making this an evening where we can think and share together about ways to welcome refugees and others. Please do sign up to our emails, look at the website, keep following. We'll be developing this theme about refugees and continuing to platform Christian partners and building a stronger bridge and a connection between there and here. And let me leave you with a challenge. My challenge to you and myself leans on some themes that I've taken away from Catherine and from Dan about faith. Catherine said, my box has really grown. And Dan said, my view of God has got bigger. And that kind of fits my own experience. As we step out, our faith and our experience of God grow and we are enriched. How will you respond and give God the room to grow your faith? Thank you and have a great evening.